Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well, and I hope you're going to get that perfect drink, whatever it is, because I've got a stunning story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. This was the first time my brother was bringing a girl home to meet my parents, so to speak. So this was a big deal for him. It had to mean something, although nobody spelt out the exact words, but we were all congruent, easily on the same page. This had to be serious for my unforthcoming brother to spontaneously be bringing a girl home to meet the family. Doing something like this was completely contradictory to his character, as he kept his seclusive love life sequestered from prying, intrusive eyes, especially those of my presumptuous, inquisitive parents. My brother Franklin was a very self-effacing, introverted, unassuming, contained person, exactly like my father, both in his personality and his outward appearance. In fact, the two of them were like two quintessential peas in a pod. If you looked at early photographs of my father, when he was 25, Franklin's age, it was quite airy, actually. It was like you were looking at a doppelganger. Both men were like clones of each other, tall, lanky, with golden skin, blonde wavy hair, the bluest, most piercing eyes that you've ever seen. Of course, my dad, now being significantly older than my brother, in his 50s, his blonde hair had thinned out considerably. He would brush it over his naked scalp to make it look as if there was more hair than there actually was. My dad had a huge bee in his bonnet about his gradual hair loss. It really depressed him. He often wore a cap back to front on his head to cover it up. I thought my father would look so terribly cute if he shaved off all his hair, but the very idea was too dreadful for him to contemplate. He said he didn't want to look like a boiled egg, which seemed nonsensical to me. Whoever put that absurd idea into his head, goodness only knows. My father could never look like a boiled egg. But each to his own. The only time my dad ever brought a girl home to meet his parents, when he was about Franklin's age, was my mother. They ended up marrying each other. I was 20 years old at the time when Franklin brought home this mysterious girl to meet the family. Growing up, I'd always received my bigger brother's consummate, circumspect attention. He'd always looked out for me wholeheartedly as his younger sister. On one occasion when I was bullied by a couple of kids at school, my brother went and dealt with them on my behalf. Those kids never ever troubled me again. He had always been scrupulously protective towards me. In truth, I had extreme reservations about meeting my brother's girlfriend. I will admit an incongruous small part of me may have been a wee bit jealous of him giving another girl his interminable attention. But I knew I wanted my brother to be happy, so if this girl made him happy, I guess I'd have to be pleased for him. I couldn't comprehend why my pedantic, purist mother was in such a dreadful state that day. My mother was bustling around the kitchen in an anxious frenzy, trying to prepare the luncheon for my brother's special guest. She wanted to make a good impression on his new girlfriend. Shouldn't it have been the other way round, I thought. I could see she looked terribly nervous. Her forehead was covered in perspiration. My mother could be punctilious. She wasn't happy unless everything was fastidiously perfect. "Relax, Mum," I teased. "What are you worrying about? You'll probably find that Franklin's girlfriend is much more apprehensive and skittish about meeting you than you are about meeting her." "Lillian is absolutely right, sweetheart," said my father, who was sitting on the very comfortable couch in the living room, with his legs stretched out on the extension padding that came out of the couch, so he was comfortably sitting back on it like an open bed. It was hardly a wonder he always gravitated towards that chair. He was tapping into his cell phone to access the news. "I'm sure the poor girl is more uptight about meeting you than you are about meeting her," he assured my mother. "Maybe so," said my mother, "but it's terribly important that Franklin's girlfriend is made to feel most welcome. I really want her to like us." "More to the point," said my father, glancing up from his cell phone briefly, "I hope we like her. I've always worried about that with our kids. Imagine if one of our children marries someone we both hate.
Sorry, Lillian, to say that in front of you, but you do have to admit it is a horrifying, alarming thought that has crossed my mind fleetingly."
"Does that ever happen?" asked my mother.
"Of course it does," said my father. "You hear the most dreadful stories of mother-in-laws at loggerheads with their daughter-in-laws. It's often because the mother thinks no one is ever good enough for her son."
Oh dear, said my mother. "Please God, may that not be me. I couldn't think of anything worse than not getting on with Franklin's wife. Oh, I'd hate a family rift."
"Keep your hair on, Liz," laughed my father. "Franklin is not marrying this woman. Well, not yet, I hope. He's merely bringing her home for lunch. I'm sure she'll be a jolly nice girl. I'm sure he's got very good taste in women, just like his father. What do they say? Like father, like son. He's a chip off the old block. So if he's anything like me, he has phenomenal, exemplary taste in women, like I did when I married you, my love."
"But have you met any of his girlfriends before?" asked my mother.
"Of course not, Liz. None of us ever have."
"Well, then there you are. How can you say he's got good taste in women if you've never met any of his girlfriends before? Also, if we have not met any of his girlfriends, why is he suddenly bringing this young lady home to meet us? Because it's serious, isn't it?" For a long moment, no one said a single word, but it was clear what we were all thinking. We were very fortunate to live in a pretty Boston neighbourhood where the street was lined with towering, majestic oak trees that shaded the entire street, as their huge, extensive boughs created a massive canopy over the road, so walking down the street, it was heavily shaded. Our detached house that stood on a reasonable-sized square of land, as did most of the properties on our street, was recently renovated, a 50s home that had been more modernised, but still possessed some of the house's original character. On the exterior of our detached home, it was very symmetrical, quite plain, as houses were indeed like that in the 50s. But my parents had painted the walls a buttercup yellow, added Wedgwood blue-coloured shutters to the windows, while climbing roses, along with purple wisteria, spiralled generously over the exterior front walls of the home and around the blue front door, giving it that quintessential English country look. Our home on the inside was open-plan living at its finest, where all the rooms blended seamlessly into each other, without any walls. We had sweeping oakwood floors, contemporary artwork on the walls, very attractive rugs, and very sumptuous furnishings. On the rear of our property we had large floor-to-ceiling windows that unfurled onto a sizable wooden deck, commanding a very beguiling view over our backyard, where we had a verdant lawn, a scattering of trees, a pretty rose garden, beds of French lavender, pretty flowers. There was a swimming pool area surrounded by another entertainment porch, with a gazebo pergola, with a retractable roof, a very extensive barbecue fit for a king, sumptuous outdoor furnishings, changing rooms, a cloakroom, and finally a gym. As Boston is a university town, my brother Franklin was attending university there. He was living in a rented house with about 6 other pupils. As at 25 years old, he insisted he couldn't possibly live at home anymore. He said that would be far too humiliating, would rob him of his independence. He enjoyed being a maverick that was self-reliant. He even had 2 jobs in Boston to bring in that extra money, one as a security guard a couple of nights a week, another working in a local hardware store. As my mother was setting the table with gleaming silverware, starched napkins, sparkling glasses, and a pretty arrangement of homegrown roses clustered together in pinks, purples, yellows and creams, all picked from the garden, I saw 2 bicycles cycling down our drive. One was Franklin, the other a young woman whom I'd never seen before, but based on her outer appearance, she looked like any other university student that you would see. "They're here," I told my mother, whom immediately ran to the hall mirror, adjusting her golden locks of hair, before she opened the front door, leaving a few seconds after she heard the knock. She didn't want to appear too eager. Franklin was standing in the doorway with a young woman. She was about 23 years old. She had long dark hair, brown eyes, a fair skin. I suppose she was pretty in a girl-next-door kind of way. But from the first moment I met her, I didn't warm to her. I'm not sure what it was exactly, but there was something rather disturbing about her. But it was more like an unconscious feeling that I couldn't personally isolate, but I did try to brush the feeling under the carpet. I didn't want to not like Franklin's girlfriend. I really wanted to like her. My mother threw her arms effusively over Franklin. "Darling, it's so great to see you." "Who do we have here?" she asked, looking at Franklin's girlfriend with a broad beam on her face.
"This, Mum, is Barbara. Everybody tends to call her Barbie."
"Hello, Barbie," said my mother, shaking her hand warmly. "I'm delighted to meet you. This is my daughter Lillian over here," she said, pointing to me, "and my husband Barker over there. I know it does sound like a dog's name, but I assure you it isn't. That is his genuine name." The young woman did not laugh at my mother's attempt to be funny, but she smiled awkwardly, her eyes darting around the place like an anxious ferret. Franklin held her hand tightly. I could see a besotted sparkle in his eyes. I hadn't seen that before. I knew at once he really, really liked this girl. He was totally infatuated by her. Before long we were all seated around the table, eating my mother's hot chicken pie, served with a dressed salad, which was delicious. But there were many awkward moments when we just ate, struggled to make any meaningful conversation. "So tell us how you two met," my mother asked Barbie. Barbie looked at my brother. Their eyes met. She giggled. "I met him at a friend's barbecue on a Sunday afternoon, actually. Franklin was grilling the burgers. I was starving hungry, so I waited for him to cook mine. I like it very well done, you see. We got talking. I guess we just clicked. I think we had a lot in common. You know how it is." "So are you also at the university then, I imagine?" "Yes, I am, but I don't live far away from here, actually."
"Would you believe it, Mum? Barbie actually grew up in our neighbourhood. She only lives blocks away from us. Isn't that ironic? It's a small world, and yet we've never ever crossed paths before."
"My parents also live in a 50s house, actually. But ours isn't as nice as yours. You've renovated your place really beautiful. I like the open plan effect of your home. Ours is very dated, stuck in a time warp, but my dad is very old school. He says he likes the character of the place. He doesn't want to change a single thing about it. But me and my mother, we'd love to renovate the place. My dad says it'll have to be over his dead body. So I guess we'll just have to do him in then." No one around the table laughed. My brother Franklin immediately changed the subject to avoid any inappropriate awkwardness. It was the way she'd said, "I guess we'll just have to do him in then," that had made my skin actually crawl. After my brother had left with his girlfriend, riding away on their bicycles, as so many people cycle on bikes in a university town, my mother was washing the dishes while my father dried up and put them away. "So what did you think of her, darling?" my mother asked me. I wrinkled up my nose in distaste. I don't like her at all. The way she said she'd have to do her dad in to renovate their home. The way she said it, it sounded, well, really off-centre. It wasn't funny at all. It almost sounded malicious, as if there was a part of her that would be quite happy to dispose of her dad, almost as if he was surplus to requirements. But then maybe I'm just being dramatic. "I thought so too. Isn't it funny?" said my mother. "I don't know. There was something about her that I just didn't like. I can't fathom what it actually was, but I guess we're just going to have to try and like her for Franklin's sake. By all accounts, he seemed completely smitten by her."
"You two are overreacting. I'm quite sure she's a terribly nice young girl," said my father in such a flat tone of voice. I knew without a shadow of a doubt he wasn't enamoured by her in any way either. He also felt there was something off about her. But why had my brother failed to see in her what we had clearly perceived? By all accounts, I thought my brother was a sagacious, intuitive man. Now, I wasn't exactly sure. Over a period of many weeks, my brother brought Barbie over to the house. Whenever I was in her company and my brother was out of earshot, she became malignantly vicious towards me. "I know you don't like me, Lillian," she virtually hissed, "but I don't like you either. The moment I laid eyes on you, I knew you were trouble." "Excuse me? You don't even know me. What on earth are you talking about?" Her menacing eyes widened. Her nostrils flared. If you ever try to attempt to break me and your brother up, you'll be sorry, young lady. I'm going to marry your brother. Come hell or high water, whether you like it or not. When I want something, I always get it. If you try to come between the two of us, there'll be hell to pay. Do you understand?" I gawked at her in astonishment. "Well, why would I try to come between you? My brother really likes you. I can't influence him as to whom he dates." "Don't act all innocent with me, little girl," she snapped. "It's happened to me before. My boyfriend's silly little sister turning her brother against me, feeding him all kinds of spiteful, vindictive lies. Well, it's not ever going to happen again. I'm not about to lose Franklin over his silly little whining tattletale of a sister because she doesn't like me. So keep your nose out of our business, will you? If you know what's good for you, you will, because you'll be sorry, my girl, if you mess with me. Do you understand that? What's your problem? You don't have to be so aggressive towards me. I haven't done anything wrong." "You haven't done anything wrong? Let's just see about that. Who's playing little Miss Innocent now? Butter won't melt in your mouth with me. Franklin told me what you said, that you had your misgivings about me. Now, isn't that lovely?" "Well, it's true. I do have my reservations about you. I don't know you." "Oh, now she gets it, does she? My point exactly. You don't know me. So get your big, fat nose out of my business, will you? Stop meddling in our relationship. Your brother couldn't give an F what you think of me." "You're right. I don't know you. I so apologise for rocking the boat." "It's too late for that, Lillian. You better watch your back, little girl, because if you're picking a fight with me, you better choose your enemies wisely," she said, coming right up to me, so that she was standing a hair's breadth away from my face, her eyes growing wide with indignation, her jaw stiffening, while she literally ground her teeth. "Believe me, girl, you don't want to make an enemy out of me, for you don't know what I'm capable of." "Are you threatening me?" She shrugged her shoulders, gave me a huge fat grin, marching away defiantly. I remember thinking, I really don't like you, Barbie. What the heck does my brother see in you? When I watched her interacting with my brother, she was perfectly lovely, all charm, lots of smiles. There was a definite chemistry between the two of them. I could see my brother was completely beguiled by her. In his eyes, it would seem that she could do absolutely no wrong. The sun literally shone out of her backside. He seemed to hang on to her every word. I so wished my brother would get a glimpse of her dark side, a side he had not been privy to seeing, as she had surreptitiously kept it buried away from him, rather like a squirrel stashing away its nuts for the winter. In my opinion, she was a natural-born actress. She could blow hot and cold as fast as you could say Jack Robinson. One minute she would be smiling at my brother with the warmest smile that could make ice melt. Then when her back would turn, she would cast me these dagger looks that were so sharp they could literally shatter glass. For a long while, I thankfully didn't have too much interaction with my brother's girlfriend, but my parents were going away for the weekend. They told my brother Franklin he was more than welcome to invite a handful of guests for a barbecue and a sleepover, which is exactly what he did. I also invited a couple of my own friends, and Franklin invited several university students. It was a great evening spent outside the entertainment area, next to the swimming pool, under the gazebo, drinking a plethora of white wine, spirits and beer, while my brother and his best friend Wayne took charge of barbecuing burgers, marinated chicken wings and hot dogs. There was music playing in the background. Some people appeared to be dancing on the lawn, gyrating their hips, singing happily to the music. I was in the kitchen with two of my friends buttering warm rolls, preparing potato and Greek salad. Who should walk into the kitchen looking as if she'd stepped out of a bandbox but Barbie herself? I must admit that she looked absolutely stunning. I'll give her that. She was wearing a shoestring black dress with slits on the side, along with some gold high-heel shoes. She made me feel very conscious of how drab I looked in my jeans and sweatshirt.
I suddenly felt conspicuously underdressed, but this was a barbecue, wasn't it? No one was dressing up for the evening. She strutted around the kitchen like a peacock, throwing out its glorious plumage in a vaingloriousness that was indisputable. Then Barbie did the most unlikely thing. She threw her arms around me effusively, as if we were best friends, kissing both sides of my cheeks. "Oh, darling Lillian, it's so good to see you. Now, don't you look so pretty tonight? I love your hair," she said, playing with my blonde locks affectionately, although I hated it, as I have a huge issue with people touching my hair. I began to flush bright pink with embarrassment, momentarily rather seduced by Barbie's flattering words, secretly wondering why she was being so incredibly nice to me. I wasn't sure exactly how to react. Was this genuine, or was this just part of a duplicitous act? I wasn't entirely sure, but she seemed to have both of my friends fooled, or hoodwinked if you like. They both seemed to think she was quite delightful, as if a bedazzling butterfly had suddenly flown into the kitchen. They were transfixed. "Now, Lillian, are you going to introduce me to your two lovely friends here or not?" she said, looking at my two bemused friends, who seemed overawed by this glamorous woman. "Well, these are my two friends. This is Lottie, and this is Candace." "Hello, hello." Barbie threw her arms around them both, as if they were bosom buddies, kissing them on both cheeks affectionately. "Any friends of Lillian's are friends of mine always," she chided. "I want you all to have such a wonderful time tonight, all three of you. Feel free to mix with all of Franklin's friends. I'll send you over some amazing wine I got from the Willamite Valley. You'll just love it. It's top quality stuff." My two friends looked at me in bewilderment once she'd left. "I thought you said your brother's girlfriend was a complete dragon. But she's so nice. I think you've judged her far too severely." "You're probably right," I said. "I must have misjudged her." The evening started pleasantly. The music was good, as it had pleasing rhythmic vibe to it, and some of those old 80s hits made me just want to dance, not like the music nowadays, which is so inferior. I remember doing a lot of dancing. Barbie was true to her word. She came over to us, giving us some special wine that was of a high premium quality, obviously exceedingly expensive, very good to drink. It was absolutely delicious, but after a while it made me feel distinctly light-headed, queasy, terribly woozy. It was having a similar effect on my friends. The moment I started drinking, I started to see stars, became unstable and wobbly on my feet. It was like everything went hazy and blurred. I remember hearing my brother saying, "Oh dear, she's as drunk as a skunk. I think we should take her to bed." Then I just blacked out after that. The next thing I knew was that someone was poking me in the shoulders. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" I heard the male voice saying to me. "I want you to pay me now," he said. Where was I wondered. I looked around me. It was exceedingly dark outside. All I could see were towering tall trees, and they were flanked on either side of the road. An irate-looking taxi driver, wearing a scarlet turban on his head, appeared to be getting exceedingly frustrated with me. His face was scowling. His brown eyes looked indignant. "Where am I?" I asked him. "You're in Washington State," he said. "Sorry? Where did you say I am?" I asked him. The man looked exceedingly frustrated with me. He looked infuriated. "Look, I bought you where you asked me to drop you off. You've been in my taxi for 8 hours now. I'd like my payment, please. It's in your pocket. I was told by your girlfriend." I fiddled around in the back pocket of my jeans. To my amazement, I found some paper notes tied together in an elastic band. I handed them over to him. I was in such a groggy state. Everything felt surreal. A large part of me really believed that this was a horrendous dream of which I would surely wake any time soon. The taxi driver started to count the money, with a satisfied smirk on his face. "I'm keeping the rest," he promptly told me, popping it into his wallet, which he put in his jacket. "I make it a general rule not to take drunks on long journeys, so I broke the rule tonight. Your friend was very persuasive about your urgency to get here, but I don't see your lift. I'm sure they'll be arriving to pick you up soon, but I can't wait for you. I've got to go." It was still dark outside, so being left in this rural environment was more than a little daunting for me, but I was having difficulty stringing my words together. "Excuse me, could you just explain yourself? What is actually going on here? I don't understand any of this. I'm very, very confused. What friend? What are you talking about? What lift?" The captious, umbrageous taxi driver looked exasperated. He shook his head belligerently, as if he'd put up with me for far too long, and had about as much of me he could possibly take. He'd seen enough drunks in his time. He liked to give them a wide berth. I watched in bemusement as he climbed into the front seat of his taxi, revving up the engine and driving away. I was so disorientated and confused. I began to walk around aimlessly, rather like a chicken without a head. I felt as if I wasn't grounded, as if my mind was floating above the trees, as if in some way I was disconnected to my body. I've never felt like this before, not even when I've had too much to drink. This had to be a dream. But why in the hell would I not wake up from it? If you've been under an anaesthetic from a heavy operation, you're trying to wake up through that foggy curtain of heaviness. You're trying to fight your way through to climb back to reality, but you're held back. That is exactly what it felt like. I couldn't bring my mind to a place of rational thought or constructive reasoning. I was like an inebriated drunk that had lost my ability to reason or even walk straight. But it was worse than that. It was as if my mind wasn't easily accessible. I was mindfully aware that someone must have drugged me. How was it possible that only moments ago I was at a barbecue in Boston? Then I drank some alcohol, and the next thing I knew was that I was being dumped in the middle of nowhere, without a cell phone, with only enough money for a taxi cab. I had now ended up in Washington State. I didn't even want to be here. Why was I here? I'd been so fast asleep for over 7 to 8 hours. I had been out for the count. I was still so drowsy. I mean, how the hell does that happen to anyone? I was so woozy, so out of things, so much so that I didn't feel any fear, or even react. It was like I was in my own delirious, drunken, highly intoxicated bubble. So I trudged along the side of the road, next to the trees that penciled up into the sky like viridescent giants. But given that it was still dark, they looked somewhat menacing. There was a cool breeze blowing through the trees, so their vertical silhouettes jiggled. Their boughs bobbed up and down, while the moonlight cast its silvery shadows over the asphalt road, upon which there were no cars that drove by. There was not a solitary soul in sight. I could hear the crickets, along with the sounds of the frogs, but I remember feeling so terribly alone, as if I was the only person in the entire world that was surrounded by hundreds of trees wherever I looked. I was feeling too foggy to continue walking any more, so I sat down for a while. I think I must have curled up into a fetal position on the earthen pavement and fallen into a deep sleep. I'm grateful that it wasn't cold or wet. I awoke up to find myself being scrutinized by 2 anomalous, substantially sized figures that were daunting and imposing. What was happening to me, I wondered. At first I was in Boston, then I was in Washington State. Now I was being eyeballed by 2 speculative, inquiring creatures. One had actually poked me to see if I would move. Was this all part of some nonsensical dream of which I was finally going to wake up? Was I inebriated and befuddled? Was I imagining these weird creatures? Had I eaten magic mushrooms or something? And was I having some nonsensical, out-of-worldly experience? I studied the creatures through my bleary eyes, rubbing them a couple of times to make absolutely certain that I wasn't seeing things. It must have been early morning. I could hear the dawn chorus, see a soft light descending over the valley. As slowly but surely the grey sky began to subside, peeling away like a layer of dull paint to embrace a much lighter, more appealing colour. So the grey folded away, and a soft light enveloped the valley. The 2 curious creatures were scrutinising me through twinkling treacle-coloured brown eyes, filled with a solicitous concern. It was then, like a blinding revelation, that I realised exactly what they were. Oh, my word, they were Bigfoot. One was clearly female. She had long sagging breasts, low slung on her chest, rather like 2 big drooping empty sacks. She was tall, lanky, slender, with a muscular body, burly, powerful shoulders. But her face was so reassuring, her eyes so kind and tender. I knew I had nothing to fear.
I could sense I was in the presence of two mighty, highly intelligent beasts, both of whom seemed benignant, empathic, benevolent, and tender-hearted towards me. The other Bigfoot I think must have been her youngling, for he was about 4 foot tall. They were both covered in long flowing hair, the colour of ash grey. Their faces were very human-like. They both had leathery grey skins, furrowed foreheads, high cheekbones, and very flat noses. For a second the female creature began to talk to the young creature. They talked backwards and forwards in a language that sounded very strange, engaging in an assiduous, impassioned conversation together, which I knew was all about me. Once again I felt that heady exhaustion overtake me. It was as if my head was filled with clouds of cotton wool. I just could not keep my eyes open, no matter how hard I tried. The next thing is I knew that I could feel myself being carried in powerful arms. I could sense I was travelling through the woods, but the tiredness I felt was all-consuming. I woke up at intervals during the day, to find myself in what I believe was a Bigfoot nursery. It was a square area, or clearing if you like, surrounded by trees. There appeared to be a large male standing in front of the trees like a centurion on guard duty. The female was in charge of watching over 4 little Bigfoot that were playing games together with stones and pine cones. There were moments when these younglings would walk over to me, watching me curiously through their incredible inquiring brown eyes, but the female Bigfoot would push them away and talk to them in an authoritative tone as if she was reprimanding them, telling them to leave me alone, that I needed my sleep. I had waves of consciousness where I would watch the little Bigfoots interacting with each other, and waves when I would drift off to sleep again as if I was floating on air. Why was I so incredibly tired, consumed by a compulsive, unrelenting, pathological fatigue that was relentless in its hold over me? But when darkness fell, I woke up to find myself alone, with just the female Bigfoot for company, who appeared to be keeping a steely eye on me. I really liked her. I stumbled to my feet, feeling this overwhelming need to violently hurl up the contents of my stomach. I quickly ran over to a bush. I threw up violently. My brow began to sweat profusely. I could taste this bitter taste of gall on my tongue. I vomited and vomited. I could feel the female creature patting my back. She kept talking to me in reassuring, audible words, as if she was trying to encourage me. It seemed like she was telling me I was going to be all right. After I vomited, I felt 1,000% better. The sluggish feeling I felt faded. The thumping headache I had had was vanquished. The nausea lifted. The overwhelming tiredness slipped away, as quickly as the sun does when it retires from a hard day's work. I stood up, looking at the Bigfoot. She towered above me, proud and tall, like a graceful, majestic, lofty tree. I felt like a tiny, inconspicuous insect by contrast to her. But she wrapped me in her undeniable warmth, rather like a blanket, in a congenial energy that was so compassionate, so loving, that I could completely surrender to her charge, knowing all would be well. I looked at her and spoke to her in English, hoping with all my heart that she would understand or comprehend exactly what I was saying. I need your help. I don't know where I am. Can you take me to a farmhouse of some kind, where there are people that can possibly help me? I know it must sound crazy to you, but I'm in absolutely no doubt at all that this Bigfoot was telepathic. She was literally looking at my eyes, as though she was reading my thoughts. Then I heard these words in my head. I'll take you to where there are people. The creature lifted me in her arms, carrying me through the wood grove, moving at a fast speed, gliding with a grace that meant not once did she jolt me. It seemed as if for her I was of no encumbrance, as if I was as light as a feather, as if my weight was of so little significance. Then I could see her leaving the tall, towering shade of the ponderosa pines and Douglas firs behind her, and moving through a meadow. Then I saw the silhouette of a farmhouse. Oh, how comforting that was! It grew larger and larger as we neared our approach. The creature then put me down at the farmhouse door. She glided away, but I sensed that she was still watching me from a distance. I was standing at a perfect stranger's door, where there were lights on inside this house. I could smell the fresh smell of hay, tack and leather in my nostrils. I knew there must be horses around.
I could hear the sound of laughter and voices coming from the house. I knocked on the door. A woman opened it. She was beaming brightly at me. She was a plump woman in her 50s, wearing an apron over her jeans. "So who do we have here?" she asked me. "My name's Lillian," I explained. "Actually, I'm from Boston. I know it sounds crazy, but I woke up to find myself in Washington State. It's an awfully long story. But may I use your phone to make some phone calls? You see, I think I was drugged. I need my brother to come and pick me up." "Oh, you poor, poor thing. Please do come in. Have you eaten anything, dear?" "No, I haven't," I admitted, realised suddenly how hungry I actually was. I could smell the most delicious savoury aromas coming from her kitchen. "Well, why don't you come into the kitchen? Please have something to eat before you phone anyone." "Please don't gawk," she told her large family, who were all studying me curiously as they were eating dinner around a large wooden table. "This is Lillian. She's joining us for dinner." After I'd eaten, I phoned my brother in Boston. "Lillian, is that you?" came my brother's alarmed voice. "Where the heck are you? Where did you get to?" "I'm in Washington State." "Where? What the hell?" came Franklin's voice. "How the hell did you get there?" "I don't know. It's a weird story. A taxi dumped me here. The taxi claimed I'd asked to be lifted here. I had the money for the fare in the back pocket of my jeans, but I have no recollection of how I got here." "That's very bizarre. You were inebriated last night. You were completely out for the count. How much did you have to drink, Lillian? I took you and your girlfriends to your bedroom at 8:30. Now that's early. Your girlfriends were zonked. They slept for 24 hours in your bedroom. It was like they were completely bladdered. They also got violently sick. They're now feeling much better. But we couldn't find sight or sound of you. We had no idea where you were." "We didn't drink that much," I assured him. "These kind people say I can stay here as long as I need. But will you come and collect me as soon as possible?" "Of course. I'm leaving right now. I'm going to take Dad's truck. I'll fill it with petrol and be on my merry way. Please pass the phone to the people so I can get their address from them." It was when I returned to my home in Boston that me and my friends began to put the pieces of the enigmatic puzzle together. We soon realised that it was after Barbie had given us the wine that we had become unusually drunk. We realised that she must have spiked the drink with something that certainly had the capacity to completely knock us out. So what she put in that drink, God only knows. One of my brother's friends saw a drunken girl being placed into the back of a taxi, while a woman was talking to the taxi driver, telling them that the girl needed to go to Washington State as soon as possible. And she wrote down the details of the address for the driver, claiming that I was going to be picked up in that remote location by friends. I realised the syrupy sweet Barbie had turned on the charm to me and my friends with guileful intent, so that we would be unguarded and swept away by her charm, obliviously unaware that she had ensnared us in her trap. As I remember her saying to me, "Be very careful of who your enemies are." I remember that very, very clearly. My best friend Lottie was telling her mother what had happened. Her mother went as white as a sheet, the colour draining from her face. "Are you all right, Lottie?" my friend had asked her mother, who is a child psychologist working with seriously sick children who have mental issues, some that have the propensity for great violence and very bizarre, absurd behaviours. "Did you say Barbie? Is her name Barbara?" she asked Lottie. "Barbara Mackenzie." "I'm not sure," said Lottie. "I have no idea what her surname is, but I know she calls herself Barbie. I've got a photograph of her that I took on the evening of the party," she said, showing her mother the picture on her cell phone of Barbie lifting up her glass of wine in a toast with an animated expression on her face. Her mother examined the picture closely. Her face went whiter than chalk, if that was possible. She said, "Oh my God, it's her!" "Who, Mum? Who is she?" asked Lottie, looking alarmed. "Was she one of your patients?" Her mother nodded. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the case with you, due to patient confidentiality, but as this is your best friend Lillian we're talking about, I would tell her to watch her back if I was you. This girl, let's just say, is not someone you want to hang around with. Growing up, there were some nefarious things that happened around her childhood that many think she was responsible for. But of course there was no evidence, but let's just say the indicators definitely suggested that she was possibly involved. It was a very dark, gruesome state of affairs. I cannot divulge them to you. I wouldn't even if I could, because let's just say they were horrific. Do you think she could have paid a taxi driver to drop Lillian off in the middle of nowhere? In Washington State, asked Lottie. Oh, I think so. I really do. But as I say, I can't discuss the case. But let's just say, tell Lillian and her brother that they need to watch their backs. Don't get involved with her in any way. I've already said too much. I could get struck off, but I can't sit back and say nothing. When Lottie told me all this, I called my brother and told him I believed his girlfriend was responsible for sending me in a taxi all the way to Washington State. She was the one who lightly drugged us. Believe it or not, when my brother challenged her, she actually admitted to it. All right, I did it, she told him, but only because your sister was interfering in our relationship, trying to break us up. She's never liked me. I had to teach her a valuable lesson. She needs to know that you don't put your nose in other people's business. So you think it's okay for you to go drugging my sister and her friends, getting her to be dropped in the middle of nowhere, miles away from home, in a strange place? Come on, it's no big deal, Franklin. She got help, didn't she? She got home safe and well. There's no harm done. No harm done? What are you smoking, Barbie? That's not the point, is it? You knew I was worried sick when my sister went missing. But did you say anything? No, you didn't. You kept your mouth shut while I was tearing my hair out, wondering where my sister was, whether I should report her missing to the police. I was worried sick about her because she was drugged. Her condition was bad. All the time you knew exactly where she was. I had to get into my truck to drive over 7.5 hours to pick her up. You think there was no harm done? My sister was dropped off in the middle of a heavily wooded area at night in an intoxicated state because you put something in her wine. She was vulnerable, a sitting duck for a mountain lion or some predatory animal to take advantage of her. Who are you, Barbie? I thought I knew you, but I can see that I don't. You're sick in the head. As far as I'm concerned, I want nothing more to do with you. Our relationship is finished. You're pathetic. Your whole family is, piped Barbie, storming off. And that was the last my family ever saw of her. I was surprised she didn't pull more stunts on my brother, but thankfully she left us well alone. I chose not to tell my brother she'd been receiving treatments for mental issues. My brother didn't need to know about that. I think he already realised she wasn't right in the head. As for the Bigfoot, that helped me. Truly, I do not know what I would have done without her intervention. She helped me get out of a right mess, watched over me in my delirious state. So for that, I am eternally grateful. I am glad to tell you that my brother is now happily married to a delightful woman called Susan. The name Barbie Mackenzie has never crossed the threshold of our home ever again. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night. And don't forget to subscribe.